Do you remember when a dollar could feed an entire family? The 1970s were tough times for many households, with inflation hitting hard and gas shortages making everything more expensive. Today we're exploring 25 forgotten poor man meals from the 1970s that kept families fed when money was tight. Let's start with Sloppy Joe's. Ground beef in a tangy tomato sauce served on a hamburger bun. This was the meal that could stretch a pound of meat to feed 6 hungry kids. Back in 1975, ground beef cost about 89 cents a pound, and when you mixed it with that sweet and tangy sauce made from ketchup, brown sugar, and Worcestershire sauce, you had magic. The beauty of Sloppy Joe's was that you could make the meat go further by adding extra sauce and vegetables. Moms would dice up onions and green peppers, sometimes even sneak in some grated carrots, and nobody complained because that sauce covered everything. The name came from a bar in Key West, Florida, but by the 1970s, Manwich had made it a household staple with their canned sauce hitting shelves in 1969. Kids loved the messy nature of eating them. Parents loved that dinner cost less than $5 for the whole family. Tuna noodle casserole. This was the dish that appeared on dinner tables at least once a week in most American homes during the 70s. You'd take a couple cans of tuna, the cheap stuff was 29 cents a can, mix it with egg noodles, frozen peas, and a can of cream of mushroom soup, then top it all with crushed potato chips or those crunchy fried onions from a can. The whole casserole cost maybe $2 to make and could feed a family of 5 with leftovers for lunch the next day. Campbell's Soup Company actually invented this recipe during the Great Depression, but it reached its peak popularity in the 1970s when convenience cooking ruled the kitchen. The genius was that everything came from cans and packages, nothing fresh needed, which meant you could always have the ingredients on hand for those nights when the grocery money ran out before payday. Beef stew. When the butcher had those tough cuts of meat on sale for 49 cents a pound, smart shoppers knew exactly what to do. Chuck roast or stew meat would simmer all day long in a pot with potatoes, carrots, onions, and maybe some celery, if you had it. The secret was cooking it low and slow, letting that tough meat break down until it was fork tender. A single pot could feed the family for 2 or 3 days, and it actually got better with each reheating. The vegetables were the cheap ones that lasted forever in the root cellar or crisper drawer. Potatoes at 10 pounds for 99 cents, carrots at 19 cents a pound. You'd brown the meat first to get that rich flavor, then let everything bubble away while the house filled with the most incredible aroma. Some families would add a can of tomato paste for richness, others would throw in some beef bouillon cubes when real beef stock wasn't in the budget. Macaroni and cheese. Before it became a gourmet dish with truffle oil and fancy cheeses, mac and cheese was pure survival food. That bright orange box from Kraft cost 19 cents in 1973 and could be a meal all by itself, or stretched even further with cut-up hot dogs or a can of tuna mixed in. The powdered cheese might not have been real cheese, but mixed with margarine and milk, it created something magical that kids couldn't resist. Some families would buy the generic elbow macaroni and make their own cheese sauce with Velveeta when they had a little extra money, but most of the time it was that trusty blue box. The preparation took 7 minutes, used 1 pot, and filled bellies for hours. You could jazz it up with breadcrumb topping made from stale bread, or add frozen vegetables to make parents feel better about nutrition. Chili mac. This was the meal that happened when there wasn't quite enough chili left over and payday was still 3 days away. You'd cook up some elbow macaroni and mix it right into whatever chili you had, stretching one meal into 2. Ground beef was the base, but smart cooks knew you could replace half of it with cooked lentils or beans, and nobody would notice once you added enough chili powder and cumin. A pound of ground beef, a can of tomatoes, kidney beans, and macaroni could easily feed 8 people. The spices covered up the fact that you were using the cheapest ingredients possible, and the pasta made it filling enough that teenage boys would actually push back from the table satisfied. Some versions included corn, others added whatever vegetables were starting to look questionable in the crisper drawer. Gravy train with mashed potatoes. Sunday's roast chicken or pot roast always left behind those beautiful drippings in the pan, and wasting them was practically a sin. Monday's dinner would be mashed potatoes, made from those 5-pound bags that cost 49 cents, smothered in gravy made from Sunday's pan drippings, a little flour, and some water or milk. The potatoes would be mashed with margarine and powdered milk when fresh milk was too precious to use for cooking. Sometimes there'd be tiny bits of meat in the gravy if you were lucky, but mostly it was just that rich brown sauce that turned plain potatoes into a meal. Kids would make volcano shapes with their mashed potatoes, letting the gravy pool in the crater like lava. This meal cost practically nothing since you were using leftovers and potatoes, but it filled you up better than almost anything else. Hot dogs and beans. A package of hot dogs cost 69 cents, a can of baked beans was 25 cents, and dinner was done. You'd slice up those hot dogs into coins, fry them up a little to get some color, then mix them right into the beans. Van Camp's pork and beans was the go-to brand, already sweetened with that thick tomato sauce. Some families would doctor it up with brown sugar, mustard, and ketchup to make it special. Maybe add some diced onions if they were feeling fancy. Served with cornbread made from a 15-cent box of Jiffy Mix, this meal could satisfy 6 people for less than $2 total. The protein from the beans and hot dogs kept everyone full, and kids loved finding those little hot dog rounds in their bowl. Peanut butter sandwiches. When there was absolutely nothing else, there was always peanut butter. A jar of Skippy or Jif cost about 59 cents and could make dozens of sandwiches. Sometimes it was peanut butter and jelly if you had it, sometimes peanut butter and honey, sometimes just peanut butter on white bread that cost 19 cents a loaf. The protein in peanut butter made it filling, and it didn't need refrigeration, which mattered when the electricity got shut off for non-payment. Some families would toast the bread to make it feel more substantial. Others would add sliced bananas when they were on sale at 12 cents a pound. This wasn't just lunch. For many families, peanut butter sandwiches were dinner when things got really tight. Potato soup. 5 pounds of potatoes could become a pot of soup that would last for days. You'd dice those potatoes, cook them in water with some bouillon cubes, add onions if you had them, and thicken the whole thing with a flour and water mixture. When times were better, you'd add milk or cream, maybe some bacon, but the basic version was just potatoes, water, and salt. The starch from the potatoes made it thick and filling, and served with saltine crackers, it was a complete meal. Some families would save potato peelings all week to make the broth richer, boiling them with onion skins and carrot tops. The soup cost maybe 75 cents to make a huge pot that could feed a family of 6 twice. Eggs and rice. Rice was bought in 20-pound bags for $3.99, and eggs were about 53 cents a dozen in 1975. A cup of rice, cooked and topped with scrambled eggs and a splash of soy sauce, could feed 3 people for less than 50 cents total. This meal came from families who learned from their Asian neighbors that rice didn't always have to be a side dish. The eggs could be scrambled, fried, or mixed right into the hot rice to cook from the residual heat. Add some frozen peas or carrots if you had them, maybe some green onions growing in a glass of water on the windowsill, and you had a complete meal. Some families discovered that leftover rice fried up with eggs the next morning made an even better breakfast than the original dinner. Fried bologna sandwiches. Oscar Mayer, bologna was 49 cents a package, and when you fried it up in a skillet, it transformed into something special. The edges would curl up, the center would bubble, and it developed this crispy, caramelized crust that made it taste like a completely different meat. served on white bread with yellow mustard, or fancy it up with a slice of American cheese if you had it. The key was cutting a few slits in the bologna so it wouldn't cup up too much in the pan. That sizzling sound when it hit the hot skillet meant dinner was just minutes away. Some people would fry an egg to put on top, making it a poor man's breakfast sandwich for dinner. Cabbage rolls. Cabbage was one of the cheapest vegetables you could buy at 8 cents a pound, and one head could make enough cabbage rolls to feed an army. You'd carefully peel off the leaves after boiling the whole head. Fill them with a mixture of ground beef and rice, heavy on the rice to stretch the meat, then simmer them in tomato sauce made from tomato paste and water. The Eastern European immigrants brought this recipe, but by the 1970s it was pure American poverty food. A pound of ground beef mixed with 2 cups of cooked rice could fill a dozen large cabbage leaves. The leftover cabbage got chopped up and added to the sauce. Everything cooked together in one pot, and the house smelled like Sunday dinner, even though the whole meal cost less than $3. Cream-chipped beef on toast. Military families knew this as SOS, and once you'd been stationed anywhere, you brought the recipe home. Dried beef came in little glass jars for about 89 cents, and you'd tear it up into pieces, make a white sauce from flour, margarine, and milk, then serve it all over toast. The salty beef flavored the entire sauce and served over day-old bread that was toasted to give it structure. It was surprisingly satisfying. Some families used ground beef instead when they couldn't afford the dried beef, browning it first, then making the cream sauce in the same pan. The total cost was under $1 to feed 4 people, and it stuck to your ribs all night long. Goulash. Not the Hungarian kind with paprika, but the American version that was basically everything in the pantry thrown into one pot. Ground beef, elbow macaroni, canned tomatoes, and whatever else you had. Corn, green beans, onions, bell peppers. The key was lots of garlic powder and Italian seasoning to make it taste intentional rather than desperate. A pound of ground beef could be stretched to feed 8 when you added enough pasta and vegetables. Cook the beef first, add everything else, let it simmer until the pasta was tender, and dinner was ready. Leftovers were even better the next day when all the flavors had merged together. Some families called it slumgullion, others called it American chop suey, but everyone knew it meant the grocery money was running low. Rice pudding. Leftover rice never went to waste when it could become dessert. Mix that cold rice with milk, sugar, an egg if you had it, maybe some raisins or cinnamon, and bake it until it turned creamy and golden. The rice would absorb the sweetened milk, turning into something that tasted nothing like last night's side dish. A batch made from 2 cups of leftover rice could serve 6 people and cost maybe 40 cents total. Some families made it on the stovetop, stirring constantly to prevent burning. Others baked it in the oven in a casserole dish. The smell of cinnamon and vanilla, even if it was the artificial stuff, made the whole house smell like better times were coming. Pasta with butter and Parmesan. When the sauce jar was empty and payday was tomorrow, there was always butter and Parmesan. Not the good stuff from the deli counter, but that green can of Kraft that lived forever in the fridge door. A pound of spaghetti cost 33 cents, margarine was practically free with coupons, and that green can seemed to last forever. The trick was using the pasta water to make a sort of sauce. The starch in the water helped the butter and cheese cling to the noodles instead of pooling at the bottom of the bowl. Add some garlic powder, maybe some dried parsley to make it look fancy, and nobody complained. This was comfort food at its most basic, and sometimes, after a really hard day, it was exactly what you needed. Liver and onions. Liver was the meat nobody wanted, which meant it was the meat poor families could afford at 29 cents a pound. Beef liver, chicken liver, whatever was cheapest that week. The trick was soaking it in milk first to take away some of that metallic taste, then cooking it quickly so it didn't turn into shoe leather. Lots of onions 2 or 3 large ones sliced thick, cooked until they were sweet and caramelized, helped mask the strong flavor. Served with mashed potatoes to soak up the gravy made from the pan drippings, it was actually nutritious, full of iron and vitamins that growing kids needed. Not everyone loved it, but when it was liver and onions, or going to bed hungry, you learned to clean your plate. Tuna salad on bread. 2 cans of tuna, some mayo, pickle relish, and maybe a hard-boiled egg if you wanted to be fancy, spread on whatever bread you had. The whole batch cost about $1 and could make 6 sandwiches. Some families added diced celery for crunch, others mixed in a little mustard for tang. When bread was too expensive, you'd eat it on saltine crackers instead. The protein from the tuna kept you full, and if you made it on Sunday, it would last in the fridge until Wednesday. Kids would trade their tuna sandwiches at school for peanut butter and jelly, not knowing their parents packed tuna because it was actually more expensive and nutritious. Cornbread and beans. Pinto beans or navy beans, soaked overnight and cooked all day with a ham bone if you had one, salt pork if you didn't, or just salt and pepper if things were really tight. A pot of beans cost maybe 50 cents to make and could feed a family for 2 days. Jiffy cornbread mix was 15 cents a box, or you could make it from scratch with cornmeal, flour, and powder milk for even less. The combination of beans and cornbread made a complete protein, though nobody called it that back then. They just knew it filled you up and kept you full. Crumble that cornbread right into your bowl of beans, add some chopped onions and hot sauce, and you had a meal that stuck with you. Spam and eggs. Spam got a bad reputation, but at 69 cents a can, it was shelf-stable protein that could save the day when the refrigerator was empty. Sliced and fried until the edges were crispy, served with scrambled eggs, it was breakfast for dinner that actually tasted good. The salty, porky flavor of the Spam complemented the eggs perfectly. Some families would dice it up and mix it right into the eggs. Others would fry it separately and serve it on the side like bacon. With toast and maybe some fried potatoes made from leftover baked potatoes, you had a diner-style meal at home for a fraction of the cost. Lentil soup. Dried lentils were 39 cents a pound and didn't need soaking like other dried beans. 1 pound of lentils could make a massive pot of soup that would feed a family for days. Add whatever vegetables were on sale, carrots, celery, onions, potatoes, and simmer everything in water with bouillon cubes. The lentils would break down and thicken the soup naturally, no flour needed. Some families added a can of tomatoes for acidity. Others went for a more curry-inspired version with whatever spices were in the cupboard. The soup was even better the next day, and the day after that. Freeze portions in old margarine containers for those weeks when there was more month than money. Baked potatoes with toppings. Potatoes were 10 pounds for 99 cents, and a baked potato could be a complete meal if you did it right. Bake them in the oven for an hour while you did homework or housework. No electricity wasted since you'd cook several at once. Top with margarine, salt, pepper, and if you were lucky, a dollop of sour cream or some shredded cheese. Leftover chili, leftover taco meat, even leftover vegetables could turn that potato into something special. The skins were the best part when they got crispy, full of nutrients too. Some families would save bacon grease all week just to have bacon flavor on their potatoes, even when they couldn't afford actual bacon. Tomato soup and grilled cheese. Campbell's tomato soup was regularly on sale for 10 cents a can, and when you mixed it with milk instead of water, it tasted almost fancy. The grilled cheese was white bread and American cheese, fried in margarine until golden and gooey. The key was cooking it low and slow so the cheese melted before the bread burned. Dipping that crispy sandwich into the creamy soup was heaven. This meal cost less than $1 for 2 people and felt like a treat, even though it was poverty food. Some families would make tomato soup from tomato paste and milk when they couldn't afford the canned version. Chicken and rice casserole. Chicken thighs and legs were the cheap parts at 39 cents a pound, And mixed with rice and cream of mushroom soup, they made a casserole that felt like Sunday dinner. Layer rice in the bottom of a pan. Mix the soup with some water or milk. Pour it over the rice, then nestle those chicken pieces on top. Cover with foil. Bake for an hour, and the rice absorbed all those chicken juices while the meat stayed moist. The whole casserole cost maybe $2.50 and fed 6 people easily. Some families added frozen mixed vegetables to make it a complete meal in one pan. Cottage pie. Ground beef was browned with onions, mixed with whatever vegetables you had, covered with leftover mashed potatoes, and baked until golden. It was basically shepherd's pie made with beef instead of lamb, because nobody could afford lamb. The genius was that you could use very little meat, maybe half a pound, bulk it up with lots of vegetables and gravy made from bouillon cubes, and the mashed potato topping made everyone think they were eating something substantial. A can of corn, a can of green beans, whatever was in the pantry, went into that filling. The potato topping got little peaks that would brown in the oven, making it look like a dish from a restaurant. Thanks for joining us on this trip down memory lane. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe.